Welcome to Halftime. I'm Doug Piper, and I'm a Halftime alumni from Greenville, South Carolina in the USA. This is our 49th Halftime webinar event, and I want you to know how much I appreciate you joining us for today's event. Now, Halftime is the world's leading peer learning center for successful people who are in transition. We teach, coach, and connect leaders who are looking for meaning, joy, and impact in their next season. Now, please let me know in the chat if the video and the audio are okay. That helps me confirm that, and then we can move on. But if the audio is bad, we want to catch it now. Also, while you're doing that, if you vote in today's polls, that's going to help Michael prioritize our discussion. We're going to that'll lead into a big part of today's event. Now, I think you're really going to enjoy today's event. It is Sustainable Parallel Careers, or said another way, winning at the business side, along with winning at giving back. Let's bring these guys up on screen, and I want to talk about a little bit about what we're doing, but welcome, Michael and Lloyd. I'm especially looking forward to this discussion today because building our next season with joy, meaning, and impact doesn't mean that you have to sell your company or even quit your job or join a nonprofit. But now for some, it might mean that. But for many, it means infusing your success with significance. But how do you do that in a way that's sustainable and without feeling torn between two worlds? Well, in the next 30 minutes, we're going to learn from Michael Spraggins and what has worked and not worked as he's run his building supply business alongside his amazing African medical ministry. We're going to hear challenges like, can you be the kingpin in both settings? Does it require living with some messiness? Will you possibly feel missing in action in both settings? So let's meet Michael and Lloyd. Now, Michael Spraggins is a business executive, entrepreneur, and global health innovator with more than 25 years of experience in leadership, business development, manufacturing, relationship, and supply chain management. Now, as CEO of Spraggins Incorporated, Michael has grown his building supply business from its beginnings as a small family business in Orlando, Florida, to a substantial enterprise with a regional presence. Now, in 2009, Michael turned his entrepreneurial focus towards improving healthcare in the world's poorest and most hungry. Leveraging his business, commercial franchising, entrepreneurial experience, he founded Lifenet. Lifenet International is an innovative healthcare nonprofit operating in East Africa. Now, since 2009, Michael's medical ministry has become a thought leader in medical health systems for low-income environments. Today, Lifenet services over 200 health facilities in 7 countries, including Africa, transforming the care received by over 1.1 million patients per year. Michael began his career with Arthur Andersen, received a bachelor's degree from Auburn University, and Michael and his family are based in Orlando, Florida. Now we also have Lloyd Reeb, and he's Halftime Institute's founding partner. Welcome, Michael and Lloyd. I'm so glad you're both here tonight. But now, Lloyd, tell me just how long you and Michael have worked together.
Gosh, Michael, I think I had dark hair and you had, hair or more hair maybe when we started 10 or 12 years ago on this journey, and maybe 13. And what I love about that tenure is I've had the privilege of watching you go through some wonderful growth patches in your business and in Lifenet, and some tough seasons and challenging times when you wondered, should you quit the idea of trying to run in parallel a business and a nonprofit? And I've watched you work it out. Your theology is rooted in the belief that both of these are serving our ministries, that running your business in a God-honoring way and using it to produce cash that you can use to make a difference around the world, and kind of integrating these And you've built a network of wisdom sources, like the founder of not Serve Pro, but Service Master, who's a great wisdom source to you, and David Weekly and others. And so you've stayed the test of time, and both have grown, and you've been used dramatically by the Lord. So what I'd love to know together is, let's learn from your journey. What has shaped your decision to lead a parallel ministry? I think you said that when you were in your early 30s, you and your buddy, and you were talking about this, you called it what? What did you call it? Not
Split time.
halftime.
So we were reading the book Halftime, and we were 30 years old, 32, and we said, the better time. We're going to write a book, and we're going to call it Split Time, because we wanted to have both business and ministry activities at once.
So, you've played this out, and now to frame this up, I'd like you to take just a few minutes and give our audience a perspective of your career, what made you unique and what made you successful at what you've been doing, and then what brought you to that season of wanting to really explore what's next and how to give back.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, yeah, I was an accounting major, went to work for a big firm out of school. And then in the 90s, my dad had a small flooring business in Orlando, and I had to decide, was I going to move to Manhattan, New York, and try to become an investment banker, or was I going to move back to Orlando and buy my dad out and take over our 12-person flooring company? And I decided that I'd rather do that and be a big fish in a small pond, essentially be my own boss. That was the better platform, and that's what I did. Started growing that business as fast as I could, got married, and then really overexpanded and kind of blew it all up. Almost blew up my marriage, almost blew up my business. That's when God really got a hold of me and really broke me. And that was 20 years ago, 22 years ago. Moved to Charlotte, right? Got a little reset, a reset in life there for 2 years. Found a great little church there with a great pastor. That's where I kind of met all my Charlotte friends, and then moved back to Orlando to grow, pick back up and grow the business. And then we hit the great. So at this point, I'm growing in my faith. I'm growing in my studies of faith. Had kind of figured out by that point that, there is a God, and I'm supposed to do what he wants, right? And so I'm reading the Bible, and it talks about we're supposed to help the poor people. And I began to ask myself, well, where will the poor be during my lifetime? And about that time, the Great Recession hits, right? And the Great Recession hit my business, steamrolled my business. It took us from 135 employees to 17 in about 18 months. And so here I was at 17 employees asking, what am I supposed to do? And that's when, I got a call from a buddy, guy named Peter Greer, who runs Hope International. And he said, hey, I've got this idea. And the idea is we're going to take what we've learned in microfinance, and we're going to use it in Africa in the healthcare space. That's my idea. And I said, hey, Peter, that's a great idea. I've got nothing to do because my business was small at that point. We didn't have much business anyway. The people, had a business intact, but I didn't have any cash flow. We had reinvested it back, but I had lots of time. And so I volunteered. I said, I'll do it. Right. I will do it. And he deputized me, and he said, great, you'll do it. And so off we went. He handed me a intern, Carol, who's a co-founder, and I grabbed a guy who's out of work in the Great Recession, Jonathan O'Connor, and he's a co-founder, and off we went and launched Lifenet. And I started flying back and forth to Africa every 3 months, and through a whole series of events, we were able to start what is now Lifenet. We're on Lifenet 4.0, and then it began to scale.
So tell us the big idea about Lifenet. What's the strategy? What's the concept? What are the results? Tell us some of the stories of the lives that you've had the privilege of touching over these many years now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what we do is we franchise church-owned health centers in Africa. So I showed up over there and started asking all the questions that Drucker asks. I got plugged into Drucker through Buford and Halftime and that whole thing. And so anyway, I started asking those questions. Who is the customer? What does the customer want? All the Drucker questions, and figured out that there are health centers all over Africa that are owned by churches. And the problem is not, are there health centers? There are, and there are nurses and there's medicine. It's just none of it works, right? And so we were able to bring in a concept called conversion franchising, where we take an existing operation and we franchise it and make it better through a system of training and supply delivery, management training. And I began raising capital, raising donations to do this support, and we began to build out really kind of a management overlay on top of these existing health facilities in Africa. We started in a country called Burundi. Burundi was maybe the third poorest country in the world. It was really a super, super hard place to start. It's like, what were we thinking starting in Burundi? It was really hard. I tried to quit over and over and over again. But we built it up.
Stop there for a sec, Michael, because there's a story behind that. This is part of what we all need to learn from your journey. Is what would happen when you try to quit? You would just get so frustrated, right? In Africa, you're there for like 3 weeks or something, and you just go off by yourself, right? So take us into that. What's that feel like?
Yeah. So when we first started, I'm going to pick on your buddy David Weekley. So I went out and Peter said, I know where we can get the money for this crazy idea. We're going to get it from David Weekley. He's a philanthropist and he wants to change healthcare in Africa. So I said, great. So we hop on a plane and we got to see David. We hadn't even started yet. We had this idea about healthcare distribution, and remember, my business is down to 17 people, so I didn't have any invested cash really. And so we show up at David's office and we make him this pitch. We say, hey, we figured out the problem to African healthcare. And the problem is pharmaceutical distribution, right? That's the problem. And we're going to fix it by starting a for-profit distribution company in Burundi. He said, okay, that's great. He looks at me, he says, so how many times have you been to Burundi? And I said, well, I've never been to Burundi. And he said, great, why don't you go to Burundi? And after you go, why don't you come back and see me then? It was pretty funny. It was exactly the right question, right? It was spot on, right? And so, but I went back to Peter and I said, we don't have any money. I'm out. I went back to my team of 2. Yeah, this isn't going to work. I quit. And so Carol, she had just graduated from college and she said, no, I think we should do it. If I raise my own support to go this summer, will you lead it and do it? And I said, okay. So I tried to quit and Carol said, no, we can do it. And so she went and raised her own support. I told her, great. That's you have to, anyway, I gave her a condition and that's a whole nother story. She winds up going and we start. So then I show up in August and what we learn this summer? And she said, well, our thesis was completely wrong. There's pharmacies everywhere, right? All our research was all wrong. It doesn't work. And so I said, okay, well, this isn't going to work. I quit. And she said, oh, don't quit. And, I went to the beach. There's a beautiful beach in Burundi on a great lake. And, I would always stay at this it's a Burundian nice hotel. None of your wives would think it was nice, but I thought it was nice there. And I would go to that beach and pray. And God said, no, or he showed me to try this other thing. And so I tried this. I came back, okay, we're going to keep going. And so we tried this other thing. We came back to the US, but we still didn't have any money. And so then I went to, I was with my prayer partner and I said, okay, I'm thinking I'm supposed to try this other thing, but we don't have any money. And he said, go see this guy, Raymond Harris in Texas. I kind of know Raymond and I sort of think that he would be good. And so I called up Raymond and I said, Raymond, I've got this crazy idea. I've never met you. Would you like to put in some money? And he flew all the way to Orlando and he saw me. He got on the plane and saw me. It's like, yeah, by the end of the day, he's like, yep, I'm in for 150 grand. I believe in you and maybe this idea will work. And so we had our first donor and off we went. And so this continued this pattern of hitting giant roadblocks and me wanting to quit and going to the beach. And every 3 months I'd be in Burundi and go to Burundi and pray and go to the beach and pray. And God would show us this workaround. And what I realized was that directionally we were right. Man makes his plans, but God orders his steps. So we were right about Africa. We were right about helping the poor. We were right about doing it. But the exact plan God kept iterating that plan. I wasn't exactly right. I was directionally right, and he would order my steps. And so that was what was happening. And then I learned that these brick walls were really good because they were God altering my course, 5 degrees here, 10 degrees there, 5 degrees that way, right? He was modifying my course. I had to pray and listen and then lead my team. And that was the lesson there.
And Michael, not just modifying your course, he's been shaping your heart and character. I mean, you are a entrepreneur with very fast uptake. I mean, when I communicate with CEOs all day long, and I have for 25 years now, and you have one of the fastest uptakes on ideas and strategy and execution. And so I've watched him shape you through these. You've called me, I don't know how many times, I need to talk now. And it's another valley, and you're basically getting your, what kicked. And then you come out the other side and you've been shaped and learned. And what I love is that now it may not always be this way, but both your business and your ministry are thriving and your family is thriving and it's a sweet spot. And it's why I want us all to hear and learn the knockdowns that you got along the way. So keep going. I interrupted you about, what you do when you felt like quitting, and you go away and you listen to God and he gives you a workaround. So take us back into the Lifenet journey of how you've iterated it to get to 4.0.
Yeah. So, we started building it just like you'd build a business. Right. And then we went multi-country and we added Uganda, and then we kept growing. We started replicating, very similar to building a business, right? It's very similar skill sets. And I'm really, I think of myself as highly entrepreneurial. And so, this is just very similar to building a business. At the same time, I'm rebuilding my business over in the US, and we're diversifying it and changing it, and it's growing. We're doing acquisitions. We're growing Lifenet. And at the same time, I started coaching, and I was building a lacrosse team for my girls and at their school. And so I had sort of three things going at once there from 2009 to maybe 2014 or 15. I dropped the coaching, and then I went down to just two. And the business continues to grow. Lifenet is growing. And then a couple years later, 17, 18, 19, I realized, okay, I need to integrate all of this and really set up what a holding company, right? And so that was the next step, is to go I wanted to be multi-business in the US. And so I wanted essentially to be able to run multiple businesses, of which I think Lifenet I think of Lifenet as one of those businesses. And I think of my top company as a holding company. And that's how I think about it.
So now talk about how a person's life changes in Africa because of Lifenet, and then some stories and scale of the kind of reach that you're having.
Yeah. So a classic story is how their life changed. Is mom, a Ugandan mom, is getting ready to have a baby, and she goes to a clinic that's a Lifenet clinic, and she has the baby, and the baby comes out and doesn't breathe. This is very common, right? The baby doesn't breathe. Before Lifenet, the nurse would probably have taken the baby by its ankles and shaken it, killing the baby or, doing damage to the baby. After we train them, they use an AMBU, this medical device to get the junk out of the lungs, and they're taught CPR, and the mother is healthy and the baby lives. So before Lifenet, baby dies. After Lifenet, baby lives. So that's how a life might be changed. That's pretty typical. I forgot the second question.
And how have you scaled that? Because one of the things you've done you're the same person in both places. Entrepreneurial, you take stuff to scale. So how have you scaled that?
Yeah. Well, we've replicated classic, we've just replicated. We've replicated our model in other geographies. It's pretty straight. I think of it as pretty straightforward. We've centralized, it's the same questions. What do you centralize? What do you decentralize? How do you scale a service business model and ensure quality? How do you build a sales funnel on the US side for donor pipeline? I mean, this is all, anybody that's watching that's in business, this is just all straightforward.
It's so your skills apply. It's not like you had to become a different person to run a parallel career. It's just like adding a piece to your portfolio and then integrating it into your calendar. And how many lives do how many people do you serve in a typical month or year?
Yeah, so I think we saw like 6 or 7 million patients last year. So something like that. So we're over, we've been at it for 12 years. We're growing every year. Call it 7 million patients this year.
Yeah, isn't that sweet? So, if you think, Doug, about the impact on, 7 million people's lives, even if you have a 15 or 20% improvement in their health care, that's pretty life change. I mean, just for one person sticking with what God put on their plate and having the courage to think about running the two in parallel. So, Michael, so that's such a powerful story. But now I want to talk a bit about why you chose to do this in parallel and what you've been learning and the advice you have for others that may be considering doing it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So before I go into that, I want to say, I didn't talk about Lifenet for years to anybody. I mean, I did not come out as a big talker. We did this quiet, small, built over time. And so that, I think that's for the first several years. I mean, I remember sitting down with a friend of mine. We're 4 years in. He didn't know what we were doing, and I told him, "Yeah, we saw 1 million patients last year." His wife changed the subject. It was so shocking. It didn't comprehend. It didn't. I mean, I did it in secret, really, and there was
Why,
no
why,
need.
why did you want to do that, Michael? I know that, the challenge you face in life is not notoriety. It's more like power and accomplishment or whatever. But why did you choose to do this in quiet to start with?
Yeah, well, the risk of fail if you go for something really big, the risk of failure is giant, and I just didn't need the energy drain. I mean,
Hmm.
it seemed like everybody I talked to, it just bounced off them. I mean, they weren't called to this. And so it was very discouraging really fast. And encouragement is critical when I'm going for something that's a big lift, that's weird, that doesn't fit with what people think. And
And
anyway, just
on
protect.
one side note, Michael, is you've had a prayer triad of guys, very talented guys with different perspectives. One that was a longtime crew executive at Campus Crusade, and one that started Generous Giving, and now you have a new partner. You've prayed what, every week for with those guys for?
Yeah, every week for 15 years now. I've been in a weekly, with the same guy, Todd Harper, for 15 years every week. And then we added a guy 13 years ago. He was with us until 6 months ago when he moved, and a new guy. So we have this discipline of weekly prayer. And yeah, I mean, if you hear one thing, like, go do that, right? That's, anything I said, go do that. Pick
But yeah,
two guys. Yeah.
so you've got three guys that are encouraging to you, and they tell you the truth. Then you got these older guys like Weekly and
Yeah.
and the Service Master
Oh,
founder,
Pollard. Yep. Pollard. Yep.
Pollard, and then you call me to have one short friend that with not that big an IQ that you can bounce things off of, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So,
and we just
I was undereducated, is the way I think about it. And so if you're undereducated, you better be really good at learning. And so I figured out young that to get anywhere, I had to learn how to learn. And the
Mhm.
best way is to find teachers, right? And so I really enjoy finding people that are, way smarter ahead of me and learning from them. It's something that I do regularly. I made a deal with myself back in my 20s. I was going to spend, I forget the number. It was like 5% of my total gross income on continuous learning. That was my
Oh,
goal. And so
wow.
that gave me an unlimited budget for books, even at 24, and then gave me budget to spend it on all sorts of continuing ed. I never was able to spend that much money, but essentially I have an unlimited self budget on continuing ed. And it's a good thing.
Interesting. So for some reason, I didn't know that. So Doug, we're going to go to the poll in a second here, but you might have a question too, because you're doing a parallel deal in your own second half, right? And but but first, stay with that, Doug. But for first, one last question, Michael, is your wife has always had a perspective that you needed a commercial piece to your world. Talk a little bit about that, because that was sound advice.
Yeah. So she believes I'm primarily a business person, and that's how I'm gifted. And you know, what she means by that is not it's not necessarily flattering, right? It's direct and tough and all those things, right? And so she's like, look, you're not really made for you're primarily a business guy. You should primarily be who you are. She's for Lifenet, but she doesn't think she's never thought I should sell the business and go Lifenet full time. She's like, you're good in doses with these people, but you're not, if any of you guys know Todd, I'm not Todd at all. I mean, everybody likes Todd.
Right.
Everybody does not like me. Right.
Yeah.
So,
You're in your face. I mean, you and I go back and forth like that. And if someone was listening, they may think we were having an argument sometimes. And the other thing is your theology is rooted in the belief that both are ministry. So talk for a second about that.
yeah. So about 20 years ago, I had a teacher that, yes. So theology is that, that God is transforming the earth, right? The Lord's Prayer, he's bringing heaven to earth, and we get to participate in that. And we have lots of agency and lots of creativity. And, I really embrace the cultural mandate, right? And so I'm supposed to use everything I've been given for the flourishing of the world. It's all mixed together, right? And
So,
that's
for example, you hire people out of prison, right?
Yep.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So there's all sorts of ways, how can we be good stewards? Well, it's in our hiring. It's how we take care of our people. It's the conditions our people get to work in. It's our giving out of our business. It's our prison for hiring program. It's our chaplaincy at our businesses. It's our how we influence those around us. How it's everything we do. And this business gives me this great platform to do all of that.
So, Doug, what question comes to your mind for Michael, and then take us into the poll if you don't mind.
Well, it's probably a tough question, Michael, but I'd love to get your thoughts on it. It sounds like, you're talking about the path that you're going and the dead ends that you hit, but you went out on a beach or a quiet place, and then you felt like you got guidance to keep moving. To me, the common theme I hear through all of this is you feel like you have a way to hear God and understand what he's saying. Well, that's a real challenge for some of us, but yet can be maybe one of the most important things for us to learn. Can you just give a little taste of how you feel like you're understanding God's guidance, especially when you hit these brick walls?
Yeah. So, wow, that's a tough question. I pray and I try to allow, Holy Spirit to impress on my, heart what he wants me to do. And often that happens, right? And I get sort of ideas. And if the ideas are congruent with what I read in scripture, and if they're congruent with what my spouse who God gave me agrees, right? And if I need some wise counsel, I ask some wise counsel. If it all kind of lines up, I just sort of take it on faith that, okay, that's the way God wants me to go, and off I go. And I pray, hey, listen, if this isn't you, God, stop it, but I'm going to do my best to obey you. And if that's not what you want me to do, you need to stop it. I'm just trying my best. And I don't really stress about it too much. I just kind of get in gear, right? I just listen. I don't really overthink it. And if it's what I think he's saying and it's congruent with scripture, I just go and trust that he'll order my steps along the way. And it's a very dependent sort of way to operate, right? And so that's the second way. I read this book. One of you guys, buddies with, I've never met this guy, Terry Looper. Isn't his name Looper?
Yeah. The Sacred Pace.
Yeah, he wrote a great book I just read a year ago or something called Sacred Pace. And his sort of method was listen, ask friend Jesus, consult the facts, look at circumstances, and get neutral. Right. And I like that. And getting neutral is getting easier and easier and easier, which is wonderful. And so I'm kind of weaving that into my process too.
All right. So if if you're listening and you've got some questions, just drop them right in there where it says ask a question. That'll help us. We're going to switch in a minute to some interactive questions. So, and I see my dear friend Mike Z is listening in. You know him, Michael, and he's one of the smartest guys I know. So, Mike, if you've got questions, share those too. Doug, take us to this poll.
All right. It's not too late for you to put in your answers to the poll. I will read the questions and then we'll see what the final count is. Which of the following best describes your biggest concern for pursuing a parallel career or a passion project alongside your business career? First answer is, I just feel I should be older and more financially prepared. Second answer is, I wouldn't know what to choose. The possibilities are overwhelming. Next answer, managing two parallel careers at the same time seems beyond me. And the last answer is, I'm already time poor. Two parallel careers would leave me with no time. Now, it looks like our trend is the majority of our audience feels like they should be older and more financially prepared, but it's not totally. Our other percentage is about the quarter of our audience wouldn't know what to choose, and the other quarter just feels like parallel careers are beyond comprehension. So I guess, Michael, we ought to answer what the majority want right now, and they felt like they should be older and better financially prepared. How would you answer that?
Well, that was not my experience, right? My experience is that I was 39 or 40, which is not, depending on what is old, right? That's how old I was. And we're at the bottom of the recessions. I was the opposite I was the least financially prepared that I'd been ever. And that was great because it made me raise money to do it, which made me dependent on others and dependent on God. And it was an antidote to pride, and it increased my humility, and it made me more dependent on, I think I said that, right? That's the main thing. It made me more dependent on God and not on myself. And so, I think I got the most character benefit because I was the least prepared or the least able personally. And the other thing, I've been both a giver or a donor and a fundraiser recipient. And I got to tell you, that's been fascinating to go through that. I highly recommend everybody go raise money for a while. It's just so good for the character. And it was great for me to kind of look in the mirror a little bit. So, yeah.
And I think, Doug, one other thing that naturally happens as I watch people pursue a parallel career, if you think about your desk, your work desk, where I'm sitting here, what I notice happens is your secondary, calling that supplements your classic business, it starts over here and you're passionate about it, but it's working and not working, and you're paying the dumb tax to try to get the thing figured out. But then it either grows or it fails. And if it grows, it slowly displaces the rest of your work. So when Bob and I were starting the Halftime Institute, I'm a real estate developer, so we own and operate retirement homes. And so I was still managing some of our buildings, and little by little, I turned them over to my business partner and paid him 5% of gross revenue to manage the business in my share of the business. And so little by little, it took over my desk. And now my business is still there. It's a parallel piece. It funds what we do, but it's a very small piece now. And it's still a joy, but it's an important part of my platform. And so you might think about it not as binary, but as just a gradual, natural transition. And Michael, you have resisted the idea of a mission statement because it's so confining to you, and you're more like a cowboy, or in your way you do business. So you're constantly adapting and changing. Where you and I disagree is I think a mission statement focuses you and you feel it's a little bit constraining, but you're still pretty focused, right? And you've just grown into this. It's just you keep adapting as you go. Isn't that what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, within boundaries, creativity happens, right? So my business is in the construction supply domain, right? That's a bounded industry. It's not like I'm all over the place. I've got, several businesses in construction supply, and my giving and nonprofit work is highly concentrated in Lifenet. So I'm a concentrated guy. I believe in being concentrated. I'm just not a mission statement guy. Like the rest of my life, I'm gonna, spend all this time wordsmithing a particular statement. I don't really see that in the Bible anywhere. What I see in the Bible is that God takes periodically, he reaches down and he tells people what to do, and it's often left turns, right? If Moses had made a mission statement while he was hanging out in Egypt, I don't think it would have occurred to him to say that his mission statement was headed to the promised land, right? So, mission statements strike me as things that we create I'm blowing up your whole mission statement thing, but you asked. So mission statements strike me as something that we create kind of out of thin air. And I just don't believe that's the program. I think we're supposed to pray and ask God, hey, God, what do you want me to do today? And then our job is do it, right? And we don't actually have to be that smart. We just have to be super obedient. And as I read the Bible, I see him giving, here, Peter's fishing. If he had said, give, what was Peter's mission statement, it might have been catch a bunch of fish and give it to the poor. Well, that wasn't the plan. That wasn't God's plan for Peter. And so, it's a little, I could go on and on about why I don't get real excited about the whole mission statement thing. You got to do this for the rest of your life. And, but that's what I think. So.
Yeah. So, and that's good. That's the give and take of this. Halftime is a movement of peers helping each other be the soil that produce 100-fold. And I would argue back on some of what Michael just said. Like, for example, it says in John 1:6, there was a man sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness so that through him all might believe. That's a mission statement. So, and Michael, you may disagree with me, but that's a purpose statement. He came with the purpose of being a witness. But nonetheless, it does boil down, like you just said, to listening and adapting and letting, the Bible says, I'll guide you with my eye, by eye contact. That's what I see you doing, Michael. Mm-hmm. So Doug, what was the second one that ranked in that question?
Yeah, there's actually a question that relates to it. So I'm going to only take one of them, and then we can get to the other one when we go to the questions. So, Michael, the other thing was 25% of our people that answered the poll could not conceive of managing two parallel careers. Can you explain a little bit how you've been able to manage that and not go crazy?
Well, it starts with how I'm wired, right? And so I'm an ADD guy. I get bored super fast. Kind of my goal, early on in our marriage, my wife was like, yeah, you need to not ever get bored. That's bad. So part of it is just basic wiring. But listen, I get over revved too. I mean, the way I'm built is, think of RPMs as, like a car. Some type of cars have really, they're good from power bands at about 2,000 RPMs to 7,000. I'm good from, 5,500 to 6,500. I got a really tight RPM power band. And if I get too slow, I'm not so good, but I can get too fast too and redline. And so I've got to kind of stay in a pretty tight band to be optimized. And so that's just how I'm wired. But I can easily, I got mad at you over this tech yesterday, right? And so that was not my finest moment. And the reason is I'm under a lot of pressure, like this week and last week. Like this week and last week is probably not the time I should be doing a seminar on parallel careers, because hopefully nobody's watching me from Orlando, because they're like, man, what are you doing? You can't even do what I got problems all over the place right now. So I got alligators and problems. So sometimes it gets a little hot, but I'd rather get a little hot than be bored. That's just kind of how I'm wired.
Now, Michael, one thing you did a while back was you had two offices just not far from each other, and you'd literally go back and forth between them. Remember that kind of concept? And now I think you've got them kind of blended. So how do you split your time, and how do you decide when you're going to focus on what issue?
Well, so what I'm moving toward is centralizing everything in kind of one headquarters. So we have about 600 employees in our business here in the U.S. and and then Lifenet with our 7 million patients, and then the African renewables business I've got going. So I have 5 units total, and I'm centralizing all those with me and a top team of 6 or 7 people. That's in process now, and I'm trying to hire a CFO right now to help me for the whole group. I hired an executive assistant a year ago, so I'm starting to bring some little infrastructure into the corporate center, right? And that's how I think of it. And by the way, this is a commercial. I'm hiring a group CFO. I need help. So because right now it's just me and my EA over all of these things, and I need to build up a little support. So if you didn't hear that, I need a group CFO.
Yeah. And if you're listening in now live or in the future, and you're interested in figuring out how to help people's wellness in Africa, or how to be a part of a business that has a ministry tail end to it, then reach out to Michael, and you can email me and I'll connect you. I connected somebody with you not long ago that I thought was going to be your perfect CFO, right, Michael?
By the way, the guy you cooked me up with last, I talked to him this morning, not for that issue, but boy, what a sharp guy. Thanks for connecting me. Anyway, I forgot how we got off on that. Oh, it's how do I organize all this? And I'm moving toward a centralized model. That's a, classic corporate M structure deal, right? Where you've got presidents of each of your units and you got a corporate center. It's pretty conventional, except one of my units is a nonprofit. I don't actually own it. We give money to it, but I'm still the executive chair and have oversight. And so I'm going to donate some of our CFO's time to help out there. And I'm going to think of it as an SBU, as a subsidiary, really.
That's awesome. So Doug, there's a few questions, and anybody else that has a question, jot it in there. It'll help us kind of frame up what's most valuable to you, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, again, we appreciate everybody joining us. And if you don't have time to wait on the questions, you can actually pop a question in there, leave, and you'll get an email with that question linked right in your email so you can watch it. You don't even have to watch the whole program. So we appreciate you being here. So we'll move right into the questions. Michael, I'll read it to you if you don't mind, and then why don't you see what you can answer. So, amazing what you are accomplishing in both careers. Congrats and thanks. It will be good to know all the resources in total that you have working with you at the center and how you have them spend their time between your two passions, how your time is allocated between the two. So thanks, keep driving. So again, I think the question could be summarized, and Mike has submitted this. Good to know the resources that you have that are centralized, that are helping you manage all this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the past, so Mike, I believe in having small corporate centers, right? And so in the past, there hasn't been anything. It's been really nobody at the center, me at the center, and that was it. But I did a significant acquisition a couple of months ago, right? And and then Lifenet continues to grow and we continue to expand. So it's time to set up a center. And so what I'm doing, I'm moving toward really it's a 7-person deal. Myself, a CFO, an executive assistant. So the 3 of us, right? I'm going to have a head of digital, kind of a chief information officer, a head of lean, right? We're making a big push into lean management. A recruiter, a centralized recruiter who helps hiring and recruiting, right? And then an analyst, kind of young analyst M&A type person. That's kind of the idea, right? We've got most of those on board already, and I think that's all I need. Maybe with 1 or 2, maybe a payroll person or 2 if we centralize payroll, but that's it. Not a lot centralized. Keep as much decentralized as possible. Really empower the division presidents and give them as much autonomy and authority as possible, and as much autonomy and authority as possible. So it's a decentralized, small corporate center model, a little more corporate control than like a Berkshire, which is pure hands off, but not near as much as a GE where you were, which is highly integrated. So it's kind of a hybrid. That's where I'm at.
All right, our next question, and I think from what I heard you describe, your experience was a little bit different. But this question is, if you felt a passion for creating a parallel ministry, but really had no idea what kind of ministry to pursue, how would you recommend finding one?
I would start with the past, right? And so I picked up this Bob Buford quote along the way, which is that life is more about archaeology than construction. And I think that is true. So the Africa stuff with me was in me when I was 12 years old, 13, 14. I went into business, but I thought I really wanted to go to Georgetown School of Foreign Service and go into international kind of foreign service type stuff. That's kind of the books I read when I was a kid, and it didn't work out that way. But it's always been in me. International. I love Africa. I'm a traveler. I'm more attracted to poverty alleviation than I am, say, Bible translations, for example. I mean, this is how I'm wired, and so God, built me the way He built me, and I just had to sort of uncover it. And so I think that is likely true for a lot of us. It certainly is true for me. And the second thing is, life circumstances have a way of bringing things that are important, and I need to pay attention to those. Our third child is adopted, so my wife is very involved now in adoption sort of ministries, right? So that was not a passion of hers until we adopted, and now it is. And so I think it's look at circumstances and look at history, kind of how has God made you, and then for me, it's also, I used logic, right? Which is why Africa, people ask. And I say, well, the Bible says help the poor. And my judgment says in my lifetime, the poor are likely to be in Africa. And, okay, there, it's kind of common sense, right? So that's how I sort of think about this.
Lloyd, Halftime has some ways to help us maybe find our passion too. Could you touch on that?
Yeah. One is these stories, because the more stories you're exposed to, something's going to trigger in your heart. Even if you say, well, I really don't like that. I don't like other continents. There's enough poverty in my own city. Well, if that's your reaction, you just learned something. So the more stories you can go on the halftime.org website, and you can watch and listen to and read lots of stories. You can get the book Finishing Well. There's 66 stories of what people are doing. You can get the book The Second Half. It's a coffee table book. There's 25 stories, very diverse, big pictures, so you can visualize it and let your heart resonate or not resonate with it.
Let me cut you off. I got a comment on that. It just comes to mind, right? So I went on a vision trip to Addis back in 2003, 6 years before Lifenet in Ethiopia. And I came back and I went in the slums of Addis. And I came back, I told my partner at the time, this guy, Michael Tremaine, I said, Michael, I loved the slums of Addis. Loved it. I loved being there. I came alive. And he goes, that's very strange and very unusual. And that means something. Right. So I guess the other one is look for, what's anomalous in your own life. What's anomalous? What's different? That's not normal.
Yeah.
And maybe that's of God. Right. So,
right.
Anyway.
No, and along the same lines, Michael, is if you can't go to Africa right now, get a global newspaper, like, pick one. When I was doing this, I was living in Canada. I got the Globe and Mail. It's the global newspaper in Canada. Read it for a week or two, and just ask yourself, what makes you mad, sad, or glad? Mad, sad, or glad? And instead of reading it for information, read it because it gives you exposure into all the things that are happening in the world. And you want to ask yourself, what makes me mad? Tear it out, put it in a file. What makes me glad? oh, I see this entrepreneur starting something really cool. What makes you sad? What makes you cry when you read the newspaper? Tear it out, stick it in the thing, and talk about it with a halftime coach. And then one of the exercises we do is we give you 500 photos and ask you to go through and pick the 3 that are most moving to you. Now they're not always sad. Some of them are like someone fishing. There's a guy I coached who has the world record for the golden trout. And he was overlooking the fact that he was passionate about fishing. And today he runs something called Fishers of Men. They use fishing tournaments as an outreach. And who would have thunk it,
There's another thought, Lloyd, which is the other thing that happened is I had started giving away money by then. I had 6 years or 7 years of giving, and just start giving money, right? And maybe meeting the people you're giving to or the organization, getting to know them. I mean, start that. I was doing that for 7 years before I ever started Lifenet. So, I mean, that's just a simple way. Just whatever you're giving is, just go double it, or triple it. Triple your giving and see what happens. I bet you'll find something fun to do. I mean, that's kind of what I did.
Yep. And maybe the last, Doug, is an urban plunge. Take a day or two and go downtown in your community with someone who knows what's happening in the compassion space and just visit 4 or 5 different nonprofits a day. And I've done that with people that I've been coaching. I take them for a day, and part of the fellows program, we take people into a community and we'll get them to see 3 or 4 different, very, very different ministries that are all making a huge impact, and let your heart respond. And then the last is you start testing it out like a low-cost probe. And either you'll come alive and it's be something you can't not do, like this has been for me for 4 years. And then it's bingo. And, the Lord has the right to change things in your life so he can take you in a different direction. So try things. Well, I know we're short on time, so we better wrap up soon. Are there any other questions, Doug, or should we stop?
Well, there is. Michael, as we wrap things up, there's always a few folks that jump in kind of late, and they know what our subject is, but we covered a lot of things through the course of our event. As you think about what we've talked about and what you've done in your amazing career, how would you sum up the most important things for considering a parallel ministry for your business or a passion project? How would you sum up the most important things in doing that?
Yeah, so I think I think prayer is the most important thing, right? And I would increase your giving of money, and I would increase your amount of prayer, right? I think those are the 2 most important things, and then see what happens.
Step out and take a risk, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Risk or rust, as my friend tells me. Yeah. Risk or rust. That's a mark.
Risk or rust. I like that.
You got to risk or you rust. I totally think that's true.
So one last thing, Doug, when someone starts to find an interest in any area of serving, whether it's evangelical or whether it's purely compassion or some blend of those, there are people that have come through the Halftime Institute that are leading organizations in literally every corner of service. So we can help you get connected to talk to somebody who's doing it and help you think about where your unique abilities could contribute. And then your parallel career can be jump-started as opposed to starting from scratch like Michael and I did. Well, we better end there. Michael, thank you so much for your time and for your life and the impact you're making. And I love the way you take ideas and just wrestle with them, like the little banter you and I did around mission statements. And by the way, I'm going to look up online and see if your business has a mission statement, but we won't debate that now.
It doesn't. No. Now, Lifenet has a mission statement. I just don't have a mission statement. I'm not a business.
Yeah, I'm yanking your chain. Don't worry.
I know.
Michael, I love the risk or rust. I think you really brought it home with that comment. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. You're super busy, man, and we understand and appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us. super inspiring. And we appreciate everybody in the audience that joined us tonight. You've taken out from your busy day to ask such great questions and join us for this discussion. We do these monthly, and please feel free to go through and check out the replays. And if you'd like to explore more meaning and joy in your life, contact Lloyd there. We put his email address there. You can contact and see how to explore these options. So we appreciate it. Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.